Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. My name is Luke Freeman.
And I'm Hannah Broderud.
And I'm Chris Province. And thank you all for being here today. Today, we're just going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about what we're reading, what we're watching, what we might be listening to, things that are top of mind right now. But, before we jump into that, before we get started, I want to talk about the importance of what we're reading and why it's important to, focus our attention around consuming information. So and we talk a lot about intentional leadership and notice, choose, act, right? So noticing what we need, choosing what to consume, and acting upon the information we gather. I'd like to start with you, Hannah, and Luke, you follow, just kind of give me an idea of why do you feel it's important to consume information and how does it help you stay sharp or better serve those you're connected with?
Yeah. So I'm going to rephrase it a little bit and say, I think it's important to be intentional about what information we consume, because I think we're constantly bombarding with information at a faster and faster pace as, technology speeds up, social media becomes more and more prevalent. There are more sources of information that there has ever been. In fact, information comes at us at a faster clip than our brains really have adapted to be able to consume. So for me, it's important to choose what I consume and be intentional about that, right? And as we talk about these concepts in intentional leadership of notice what am I consuming? Where am I spending my time and my focus and my energy in terms of consumption? Choosing with intention what I'm going to focus on and then take action on that, like acting on either the choices, making different choices, or acting on the information itself as I'm learning it, as I'm absorbing it. So, and for me, the reason it's important is because where focus goes, energy flows, right? I want to be able to be intentional about how I channel my energy, right? Energy is a limited but renewable resource that we have. It's like a battery. And once you're out of juice, you got to charge for a while before you have energy again. And so if you keep depleting all your energy, and focus is one of those, it depletes our brain's energy more than anything else, right? The brain takes up only about 2% of our body weight, but uses 20% of the energy resources. And focus is what takes the most energy for the brain. So if we focus on the wrong things, it means we end up with not enough energy for the important things. So that's why it's important to choose intentionally what I consume.
You bet. Luke, thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I would say we are living in an information-rich but wisdom-poor world right now. And so, as Hannah said, we are bombarded with information from everywhere all the time. But meaningful insight from that data is a little bit hard to come by. There's a lot of digging that has to be done. I think about the way, search engines have changed. When I was in college and I first discovered Google, I could pretty much find anything I was looking for within a matter of a minute or two, back to a citation source, like where did the information come from? Well, now all of this advertising economy has built up on search that if you Google anything, you get a bunch of junk really quickly. And so it's become a real skill that most of us have built over the last 20 years to be able to find what we need information wise, but it does require energy. And so for me, I don't think about is it important to take in information, which I think is the question you asked. I think about, the importance of collecting wisdom and insight that helps me make meaningful, actionable choices as I move through leadership.
Right. And I second that. It's this idea of, hey, if we've chosen to be a leader for a career, then are we not obligated to continually to develop and refine our skill sets to succeed within that role? But I want to call out two specific things about why consuming information or why being resourced from an intellectual standpoint is important. One is for intellectual well-being, right? Doing the intellectual labor that gets a part of all of ourselves. And I think if I'm going to be well, I need to be intellectually well. So that means consuming things that are going to be helpful in that regard. And secondly, I would say ideas. Like, where do ideas come from? I have a certain level of crystallized knowledge today, but growing my fluid knowledge and how I'm able to bring different resources into different conversations requires me to consume new information. So I've set today in this more static existence with crystallized knowledge. The only way I can tap new ideas is through new information. So I think that's when I think about why it's important for leaders to continue to grow and engage with new resources, even things you may not agree with, or things that contain, things we don't necessarily like, quote unquote. But looking at those for the values they do carry with them and valuing minority perspective, I think, is also important. So before we got started today, I just wanted to kind of discover some of that with you all, emerge like why all this is important and why we talk about what we're reading and what we're engaged with. And without further ado, I'd love to know what you guys are plugged into right now and what's top of mind. So Luke, I want to start with you and see, what are you engaged with right now?
Yeah. And for me, the things that have risen to the top over the last couple of years have been things that help me have those insights, like I mentioned, into just all the information. And so a couple things have become really clear. One, it's important for me to read the news every day. And, that doesn't have to be some sort of, spend 2 hours doing it. But I do. I scroll through the news, usually every morning when I wake up or at some point when I get a break in the day. And for me, as a leader who's responsible for advising and mentoring other people, I just need to know what's going on and have some sort of situational awareness. Now, for me, it's important that I get my news from I will say, as objective sources as possible. And so I'll typically read about a topic from 2 or 3 different perspectives just to make sure that I'm getting something that's as objective as it can be. So for me, news is important. And then the other thing that has really risen to importance for me is learning more about technology and what's happening in the technology landscape, which is funny because, I grew up, like, my undergrad degree is in outdoor leadership. So, using outdoor backpacking trips and climbing and paddle sports to help teach people leadership. And, then I worked at a camp and conference center doing leadership training for a long time. And I felt really separate from what was happening current event-wise technology. But now, as I seek to help businesses succeed, I really think I missed out a little bit. There are whole phases of technological evolution that our culture went through that I intentionally opted out of. And I think it made me less effective and less potent as a leader. I think it made my brand a little bit less potent. And so now I really want to understand what's happening with technology so I can leverage it and be as potent as possible. So a couple specific sources. I'm a podcast guy, so I listen to Pivot from Kara Swisher, who's a technology journalist, and Scott Galloway, who's a professor at NYU Stern School of Business. And they talk about current events and all sorts of things, but really their focus and their area of expertise is on technology strategy, technology investing. And for me, just understanding from their perspective what trends are emerging is helpful as I talk to clients and figure out, even for our business, what do we need to have on the horizon. And then the other one that I've really tried not to miss an episode of, it's called Hard Fork. It's a new podcast from a couple tech columnists. And they really, this year, almost every episode's been about AI. And it was kind of on accident. They launched last year, ChatGPT launched. Now Bing has the new, what people think is ChatGPT 4 built into it. But for me, doing a very human job, if I don't understand what is happening in the world of technology or AI, I don't have a clear value proposition, because every single prospective customer should be asking me, how is what you offer different than what I can find online? And I need to have an answer to that. And for me, my answer is, yeah, we take all of those trends as best practices and apply them to individual settings, individual context, individual purposes that organizations have. But if I don't understand what best practice and emerging technologies are, it's very hard to apply those to an individual leader's, challenges that they're facing.
That is a fantastic kind of rundown, Luke, of how you approach a day and how do you stay kind of with the proper information that allows you to respond to those day-to-day interactions and the operational needs and strategic questions that come up in our conversations with client partners. Hannah, I want to slide over to you here in just a moment and find out more about what you're doing. But I think where I come from probably piggybacks on what you were saying, Luke, is how do I set up my day intentionally to start with appropriate information? And I want to speak to, how I consume news on a daily basis. Admittedly, I don't consume a lot of national news. I keep track with economic trends and financial markets, cost of fuel, consumer price index, things like that affect retail buying behavior. And outside of that, I focus more in on the regions in which we do business. So every morning I will read regional newsletters, and who I think does an excellent job of that is Axios. And, we have Axios HQ as an organization that we utilize for a communications tool, but they do an excellent job of journalism in local markets. So I wake up and I read Axios Northwest Arkansas. So I learn what's happening with Walmart and the suppliers and all of that corridor, the outdoor, the tax projects for outdoor recreation, connecting transportation, whether that's in personal transportation and the trail system there, their efforts in electric vehicles production, and being a central kind of focal point or trade region for electric logistics, right, and moving product on our interstate system. In kind of all of those efforts. So Northwest Arkansas has a particular set of priorities and focus that goes into our ability to support that market. Then I read Axios Seattle, and I read Axios Denver, and I read Axios Dallas, and just try to get a sense for what's happening, not only in our trade region here in Oklahoma, but the trade region of every client partner. And because it's their regional strategies that we're supporting. So I try to do that on a day-to-day basis. And by plugging into, or by being intentional about how I select those news sources, it also gives me access to the primary thing that I'm digging into right now, which is, and I want to point all the listeners this way. So Axios just released the 2023 State of Essential Workplace Communications. So I'm really digging into that. And what I will call out is, in this report, there's all these things about when it comes to communicating amongst leaders and amongst team members, it highlights the differences of what leaders need and what employees need, or those contributing team members, things that leaders tend to focus on. And they researched, I think there's over 1,000 samples in here on the survey, but they talk about leaders really seeking updates and communication around culture and values, personnel updates, business updates, whereas the individual team members are looking more around what are the operational changes that are going through? What are our organizational goals? Like, give me some direction, make sure I'm on path so I'm not wasting effort. What are benefits changes? What DEI initiatives, things like that. And so you see this real distinct difference between, hey, line level personnel want to know where we're going, what are our goals, what are the policies that are impacting me. Leaders are focused on what are our culture and value initiatives, what personnel updates, what's happening with our staff, who is where, and how are they going to fill, these mission critical roles, and how is our business doing? So very different kind of priorities between the line level and leadership, and it helps highlight what those are. And it even goes in and talks about how frequently line level employees want to hear from certain levels of the organization. And it's something that we talk about a lot, is like, hey, if we're not speaking to our team members, what are we really doing? But in this, like, we get real data that says, they want to hear from VPs and directors multiple times a week, right? Not once a month, not once a quarter. Like, VPs and directors, the expectation from staff is we feel informed when we're seeing them multiple times a week. Our owner, C-suite, president, like, those are the people that once a month is a threshold they can get away with. But everyone below that, it's multiple times a month, multiple times a week. And it really highlights this expectation. Like, we're just not keeping the right information flowing on a frequent enough basis. So anyway, that's what I'm dug into right now. And I have access to that as a result.
Yeah, I was just going to shout out that what you just shared is an example of being an expert in something. And to apply that to any leader, like, there's something that you should have domain expertise around. For our team, it's around state of American workforce, trends that are happening, future of work, management effectiveness, strategy. Like, we should be reading every day about news. We should understand when Gallup releases a new study, what the constructs of the study were. Like, that's what we should be expert in. But everyone should have something that they're an expert in, that they are staying up to date on current trends. And it doesn't matter who you are, what your role is, becoming an expert in something is incredibly valuable.
Right. And to that end, like, what do I care most about? Climate setting, communications, impact on culture, how we get the right people in the right room at the right time with the right message. And also exploring, like, this report also does a great job of exploring modalities, like newsletters and in-person meetings and ad hoc emails and the effectiveness of all that. So very much like, I'm going to naturally engage with material I'm most interested in, and that creates a platform for me to hopefully become expert in something, and provide value to the people I'm connected with. But Hannah, as you look at what you're consuming, like, what's top of your mind? Where are you developing expertise? What are you looking to advance your skill set around?
Yeah. So I take a little different take on news. So I'm intentional about what news I consume as well, and when. So I prefer to not read the news first thing in the morning, because I try to be intentional about how I start my day in the most intentional way that is proactive rather than reactive. And news, especially national news, can be very triggering to the nervous system. And that's not how I like to start my day. So yeah, I tend to scan the news towards the end of the day and see what happened today, right? And I focus, like you, Chris, more regionally and locally. I want to know what's happening in my local community, and also zoom out globally. I am interested in global news and global trends and global events. I have to admit, probably even more than nationally what's happening in the country. So yeah, I guess we all have preferences of where we kind of zoom in or out when it comes to
Mm.
that. So when I'm living my intention, I start my morning by reading something that is of personal interest for my own development so that I can start my day with inspiration and thinking around what intentional thinking around the things that I want to focus on for the day or for the week or for the month, whatever kind of my um, I do like to kind of set intentions for each month, right? What is my focus on this month? And I'm very interested in staying, you know, abreast of what's happening in the social sciences, social psychology, those types of topics. And I'm a big fan of reading books. My dad instilled that in me since I was very young. We were not allowed to have comic books or anything like that in the house. We were always encouraged to read books. So my dad would feed me my voracious appetite for books. I would ask for bigger and bigger books. And I read, things that were kind of well advanced of where I was at, where I just wanted to read something interesting, right? So I've kind of kept up with that. These days, I like to have books read to me. I do read paper books still. But I often start with a new book on Audible, listening to it. And if it's a book I really, after the first kind of listen through, I may purchase a physical copy or a Kindle copy if it's something I really want to study deeper. So, and then I like certain trade publications, that are specific to the work that we do. And I think for me, the Harvard Business Review is always chock full of new research and interesting articles. So that's one that I tend to on and off. Like some months I devour the whole thing. Other months, I kind of scan through and look things up as needed. So yeah, those are the topics that are top of mind. A recent read that, book that I read that I really appreciated is called Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. And it's really about what is toughness and how we got toughness wrong. So that's mental toughness, physical toughness. What does it mean to actually build toughness, right? And it starts off with kind of what we how we took the wrong lesson for from the military when we say sink or swim, and use that as a kind of a positive thing of like, well, you're going to sink or swim, right? It's learning the hard way. And yeah, we learn a lot from difficulties and from hard lessons. But if you drop someone into the deep end of a pool without having any swimming, like any basic skills in swimming, they're probably not going to make it. You don't actually learn how to swim by being dropped into the deep end of a pool. So having some basic skills in swimming is really important. And, it talks about this idea of stress inoculation, where if we get plunged right into something that we're completely not prepared for or have the skills for, we're not going to do really well. But if we gradually expose ourselves to that and to harder and harder things while building the skill and the stamina to do it, we can absolutely do that, right? And the author comes from, sports psychology world and was a competitive runner for a lot of his career. So there's a lot of sports analogies in the book. And I've seen that, like on my ongoing journey with running, if I had started with just running a marathon without actually doing the hard thing of building the skill and the stamina for running, there's no way I could have done it, right? So there's some great analogies to leadership and building leadership skills and building endurance and mental and physical toughness. So that was
Yeah.
the recent read that I really appreciated. And there's, a few pillars of toughness. First is ditching the facade and embracing the reality, like what is actually happening, paying attention to the cues from your body, from the environment. Are we calibrated to reality? And do we have a realistic view of our own skill level, right? Where we're at. And then paying attention, listening to your body, which means also paying attention to our emotional states, right? So toughness isn't about just ignoring pain, ignoring emotion, barreling through. It's about paying attention and being really aware of exactly where you're at and what your capacity is. And then, yeah, like emotions are messengers. Emotion is information. It's data. It's important data, like for ourselves, for the people around us, paying attention to emotional states. So it's kind of a ongoing theme in a lot of conversations that I'm engaged in, right? Like, what is the value of emotion in the work that we do, and how well do we pay attention to our own and to others? And the key message is that emotions are messengers. They're not dictators, right? We don't have to follow every emotional impulse that we get. Like, we can override them. So when I'm being intentional about reading things that are continuous learning for me, developing my professional skills and staying on top of what the science says, which is there's often a big gap between what business does and what science knows. So for me, it's important to know what science actually says and being able to teach leaders and businesses new practices, right? That are not just we keep doing this because it's what we've always done. No, let's look at what is actually happening in the world of science. What do we actually know to be true, and how can we implement that truth in a meaningful way?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is I need to work on how I'm running my swimming lessons. And secondly, boy, that statement, nobody likes a quitter, however true that may not be the most helpful assumption, right? For
Fair.
us as we take on hard things. That's helpful. I think last week I was talking with a senior leader of an organization, and we were talking about doing hard things. And it's a lot of times when you find an underperforming organization, you'll find a leadership team that's apprehensive about doing hard things. They don't want to step on toes. They don't want to do the lift. Things are good. The good is the enemy of great. Good keeps leaders and teams from doing hard things. That's the story that I've seen over and over again. And I think that's where good is the enemy of great is seated in how it influences our ability to do hard things. Because when it's crunch time, people do the hard things. When we're 45 days from bankruptcy or receivership, everyone does all the hard things. But when we put $80 million in the bank and should have put $120 million in the bank, no one knows it's missing. They will never know the money we don't make. And that's why it's important to keep, ethical intensity, purpose intensity, strategic intensity. Those things matter to an organization. In what kind of these concepts you're talking about, Hannah, are so central. Like, the intensity matters. We have to be able to do hard things, or we isolate and performance trends downward. Right.
Yeah.
So awesome takeaways there. Luke, any thoughts on doing hard things?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll go back to what our role is with most clients. It's an accountability partner to say, if this is something we care about, if the shared purpose of this organization matters and it makes the world a better place, isn't it worth doing hard things for? Isn't it worth stretching ourselves? Isn't it worth having uncomfortable conversations? Isn't it worth getting clear on our priorities, clear enough that we can say no to some things that are shiny objects that are going to keep popping up for us? So all of that's hard. And I think the challenge is like being able to take a break, as Hannah said, and then get back to doing hard things, right? We can't redline 100% of the time, all the time. But I think what we've seen is that people redline for a little bit, they do some really hard things for a season. And then when they retreat, which they need to do, they need to get a breather, they need to exhale, they need to, experience some time for resiliency. But the outcome should be resiliency, which is defined by, facing challenge and overcoming challenge, which means you get back in there. And I think what we often see is people retreat and then they get comfortable in the retreat state instead of moving back into pressing forward hard. And that's the cadence that we want to be able to build and encourage towards, is how do we get back out there quicker, faster, more effectively, more efficiently, learning the things we need to learn to continue to grow.
Yeah. And I think that important key there, Luke, to building resiliency is resistance and recovery are both necessary for building resilience, right? And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned from running, that the recovery is part of the work of building strength, stamina, skill, right? And resilience. It's part of the work. And then just a really quick note to, another takeaway from the book, Do Hard Things. We can do hard things when our needs are met. So that means meeting our physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional needs actually makes us more resilient and will allow us to do harder things. It's not the other way around. It's not about depriving yourselves of needs. That's not what builds toughness. It's actually having needs met and then doing resistance and recovery and making sure that you are adequately prepared for the challenge.
Yeah. And that ties back to, once we find success with a system, it confirms the effectiveness of the system.
Yeah.
Right. So if we execute restoration and we go into kind of learning the deep skills of a discipline, we develop that mastery, and it's proof to us that this system works. So if we start with restoration and learning, and we find success with restoration and learning, we will actually do more of it and kind of spin up our resilience as we go. I want to encourage our listeners to practice something with us, though. And as you're working through whatever information or resource you're engaged with, connect with someone you care about and have the conversation about what you're finding meaning in, and find out what they're engaged with and what are they finding meaning in, and how is that influencing kind of their day-to-day and their approach. And we attempt to do that when we talk about topics here on Magic in the Room. You'll find a lot of leadership guides associated with these topics at magicintheroom.com. You can access all of our episode rundowns, any materials associated with the episode. That's all there. And for us, this is just a labor of love and a way to connect with other leaders. And we'd love for you all to do the same. Also, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a podcast review on your Apple Podcast platform, that's going to make a big difference in helping people find us and help get the word out and get the guides in the right hands and champion for servant leadership where people matter and creating environments where people thrive. So if there's somebody you think could benefit from hearing what we talk about here, please feel free to share this episode with them and invite them to join the conversation with us here on our little podcast. So as we sign off, I just want to say we're approaching that magical number of 150 episodes. Let's get a message of gratitude here. What's been your experience, and what are you kind of thankful for as we've enjoyed this journey together? Hannah, I'll start with you.
Man, that's almost 150 conversations with what are both of you and some incredible guests and mentors and teachers that I've learned so much from. I mean, I'm just so grateful for this whole journey that we're in our 4th year now, I think, of doing this, right? So 3 years and 150 episodes, or getting near that. My journey has definitely grown, and it's been enriched because of these conversations. So that's what I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, I'll tie it back to our theme for today, which is having meaningful conversations about things that matter. And, I can read news, I can listen to podcasts, I can read books, all of these are important as a leader, but it's really helpful to talk through challenging, relevant, meaningful stuff with other people to even get clear on what we believe. And for me, that's been a big benefit of this, is getting more clear on my beliefs and how I engage with trends that emerge and challenges that our clients face, because I've gotten the chance to really talk through a lot of things with you two and then with some amazing guests as well. So for me, there's a takeaway there for listeners, and that, if you don't have some sort of regular practice of really hey, what's most important right now? What's our workforce facing? What's our leadership team facing? Let's go get coffee and talk about it and work through it. There should be some platform or some format for you to be able to do that. And for me, this has been one of those, and I'm really grateful for it.
We'll have to do a bonus episode on what we consume for fun, because this episode sounds like we're just all serious all the time. And I know that both of you, maybe at least Luke, I don't know about you, Chris, but
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have other things that I read for fun as well. So we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah. It's funny because fun me and work me is the same me. So this is fun. I get so much joy out of spending time with you all. And how, like I said, it's always a struggle for me to keep up. So this definitely keeps the pressure on. And maybe that's why I don't have any fun, Hannah. I have to spend so much time just trying to keep up that it eats up all the resource. So no, I really appreciate it. I think it's great to share these conversations. For any of you all out there listening today and you want to find us, we're at purposeandperformancegroup.com. You can find us on LinkedIn. We're also on Facebook and going live with Instagram. So I will say, out of all the seasons, I'm most excited about this one. As we continue to iterate, we continue to dial in the conversations. I know we have some great guests lined up, and just the world we're in continues to evolve, and I love evolving our conversations together. So thank you all very much. Thanks for the gift of your time. Thanks for everyone that gives us a listen. Remember to pop us a like or hit us up with a review there on your favorite podcast platform. That'd be really appreciated. Until next time, we'll see you back here on Magic in the Room. So I appreciate you all joining us. And hey, I'll read us out with our credits. Magic in the Room is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Broderroot, and Luke Freeman. It's produced by Ben West with social media support and management by Emma Holland and Michael Manfredi. Our theme music is by Evan Graham, and you can find all of his music on Apple Music. And Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group, and you can find us at purposeandperformancegroup.com or all of our previous episodes at magicintheroom.com. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next time.